It's the lesser traveled or lesser followed venture capital market. So let's talk about them, I guess, one by one. So you guys at Impacto focus on the Andean region, which is Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Chile, Bolivia. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on each market. If you could take it one by one, I guess want to start with Ecuador. I mean, what does the venture capital scene look like in Ecuador?
Sure. I guess maybe to kind of level set across the five markets that we invest in, maybe actually even taking a step back, let's talk about venture capital in Latin America.
Sure.
Latin America has, I believe, 28 countries, if I'm not mistaken. When you look at the venture capital market, this year it'll be about $4 billion. That's significantly over the past couple of years. 60%, 60 to 70%, depending on the year of the capital that's invested in venture capital in Latin America goes to Mexico and Brazil, the larger markets that you mentioned. And then you have a pretty big fall off after that. So when we talk about the markets where we're focused in the Andean region, Colombia and Chile are the more developed venture capital markets. Peru is an up and coming market. Ecuador has really interesting things going on, but is smaller, and Bolivia is a more nascent ecosystem. So that people kind of have an idea of how these ecosystems compare. Ecuador, living in Ecuador, and also as you mentioned, I think at the beginning, I'm president of the EcuaCap, which is the Ecuadorian Venture Capital Association. We do a lot of work to promote the Ecuadorian venture capital ecosystem, and it's ecosystem with a lot of talent, with a lot of interesting startups, mostly early stage. And we've won one unicorn in Ecuador, Kushki, which has raised some big rounds over the last couple of years. And then there's a lot of kind of up and coming startups that I think we'll have a lot of interesting news from over the coming years.
Okay. And then what's it look like once you start to get past the early stage venture capitals? Are there funds focused on, later stage venture capital in the Andes or much less so?
There's not a lot of funds focused specifically on the Andean region in terms of later stage venture capital. There, what we see tend to be international funds, whether they be regional or often global funds that are coming in. I mean, the venture capital market in Latin America in general, kind of local funds tend to get you up to Series A. And once you're talking about Series B and beyond, there's really not a lot. Brazil has more of those later stage funds than other markets. But outside of Brazil, there's not a lot of local funds. And then you're really talking about raising large rounds from a combination of maybe some smaller tickets from local funds and larger, more global funds. So it's really the focus is on in the Andean region. Most of the opportunities are kind of in pre-seed, seed, pre-Series A, and then a select number of companies that are kind of at that Series A point.
Interesting. So then moving forward, the next 5 years, do you expect the two major Andean venture capital scenes that you mentioned, Colombia and Chile, to continue to be the best opportunities or the most robust ecosystems, or do you think Ecuador, Peru, maybe Bolivia can catch up?
Yeah, I think the growth that we're seeing in Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia is definitely significant over the last couple of years. Whether you measure that in the number of startups and the amount of capital raised, of course, there's cyclical elements here, but kind of talking about the secular trends, the interest. Kind of, there's a big cultural component to entrepreneurial ecosystems, and it has to do with entrepreneurs choosing the entrepreneurial route instead of going to work with a stable salary at a big company, which is a big cultural consideration. And so I think we're seeing a lot of those kind of the baseline progress that in those markets that are earlier stage that will help them to grow. Also, more and more ecosystem actors. There are new venture capital funds that have opened in all of those markets over the last couple of years. Accelerator programs that are growing or that have recently been created. And so those are kind of the components that you need to have ecosystem growth. So I'm really optimistic, and the reason that we're focused on the Andean region, not just some of the more advanced markets, is that we see a lot of opportunities in the more nascent entrepreneurial ecosystems, and we're really optimistic about the growth that we'll see there.